Hello everybody, so early on here and welcome back to another mathematics video. In this video we will be dealing with the trigonometric ratios, and at the end of this video you should be able to use the trigonometric ratios to find the value of missing sides, find the length of missing sides. So it says trig ratios are used to relate the angles and sides of a right angle triangle. And we basically use them to solve problems involving the right angle triangles. So there's one thing we need to know. The trig ratios, they only deal with the right angle triangles only. And we use them to find for missing sides and missing angles. So before we can actually use the ratios, before we get the formulas, we must first know to label the right angle triangle. So the first thing we need to do is, of course, identify where the right angle is. We know there is the right angle. So in this right angle, we will be given an angle, or sometimes that angle will be represented by theta. So depending on where theta is, that will impact some of the sides. So let's just say theta is at this angle here. And now we want to label this triangle. So there are three sides in the triangle and each side has a name. So the first and most important name would be the longest side of the triangle. So the longest side of the triangle will be the side opposite the right angle. So wherever the right angle is, the side opposite that will be the longest side. And that side is known as the hypotenuse. So we can use HYP for short. So the hypotenuse is the longest side, which is the side opposite the right angle. So the next side would be the side opposite theta. Now depending on where theta is located, that will impact where the opposite is. So if theta is here, the side opposite theta will of course be known as the opposite side. We'll just use OPP for short. So since that side is the opposite and that side is the hypotenuse, the remaining side would be the adjacent side. So we call that ADJ for short. So to recap, the hypotenuse is the side opposite the right angle triangle. The opposite side is the side opposite theta, or opposite the angle that we are referring to. And the adjacent side is the remaining side. So now that we have a good understanding of how to label these sides, because that's the first thing you need to do when you are dealing with the trig ratios, you need to label each side. Now let's head into what exactly are the different trig ratios. So the first thing we have three trig ratios: sine, cosine, and tangent. So sine, sometimes we say sine, S-I-N, and sine theta is opposite over hypotenuse. Cosine theta, or sometimes we say cos theta, is adjacent over hypotenuse, and the tangent theta, or tan theta, is equal to opposite over adjacent. Now there is a mnemonic that we use to represent this trig ratio. Some people may know it as some old horses can always hear their owners approach. And of course, the first letter for each word will represent the first letter here. Some old horses can always hear their owners approach. So that is one way to remember it, and the other way, some people remember it as Sokatoa. Sokatoa. Some old horses can always hear their owners approach, or Sokatoa. Now let's head into some additional things that we need to know before we can apply the trig ratios. The first thing, we need to identify the information given. What angle is given, what sides are given, and what side is given. So after we finish doing that, we label the triangle, and that is how we can identify it. We label the triangle by the different sides, and also we identify the angle. And then from what is given, then is when we decide which ratio to use. So we choose the correct ratio from what is given, and then we substitute the values into the ratio or the formula, and then we solve for the unknown side. And then of course you have to use your calculator, because there's no way for you to find cos. I mean, there is a way, but in our secondary school system, there's no way for you to work out sine, cos, and so on without using the formula. Or I should say, at the CSEC mathematics level, the general mathematics level, there's no way to work that out without using the calculator. So step 1, identify what is given, label your triangle. Step 2, choose the ratio. Step 3, substitute your value. And then step 4, solve for the unknown. So of course, before you can solve for the unknown, that means one thing alone must be remaining. So there should just be one unknown, and then you solve for that. So with all that, let's do an example. So this one says, determine the size of x. So we see we are given two things. We are given an angle and a side. We want to find the size of x. So first things first, we identify what is given. So we see here's the angle. So the side opposite that, we can call that the opposite. And then we see here would be the hypotenuse. And then we see the remaining side would be the adjacent side. So we see we are given the adjacent and we want to find the opposite. So we look at the trig ratios and we see which one of the trig ratios has the adjacent and the opposite. As long as a trig ratio has the combination, we use that trig ratio. So let's put down all of the ratios and then we'll see which one is suitable. So some old horses can always hear their owners approach. So I'm using that method because I don't want to go back to the other page. So let's see. We are given the adjacent and we want to find the opposite. So which one of these trig ratios has those two things? So the adjacent, so we see cos and tan has the adjacent and we want to find the opposite. So we see tan has the opposite and the adjacent inside its formula. So we use the tan ratio. So we can say tan theta is equal to the opposite over the adjacent. So you can say tan. Now theta is always used to represent an angle. Whatever angle you use as reference to find the opposite and so on side, that will be theta. So theta in this case would be the 27. So this would be tan 27 is equal to the opposite would be x over the adjacent in this case, which would be 10. So now it's just for us to solve for x. So in order for us to solve for x, all we need to do is get rid of this 10 that is dividing. So when we take that 10 over the equal sign, it will do the opposite of what it was doing, which is to multiply. So since it was dividing, and we take it over, it will multiply. So we'll have 10 multiplied by tan 27, and that is equal to x. So hence x will be equal to 10 multiplied by tan 27. That would give us, when we punch it in our calculator, we'll get approximately 5.1. So the value of x is approximately 5.1, or if you want to round this off to the nearest whole number, approximately 5. And that is how we answer these kind of questions. Step 1, label. Step 2, find a suitable ratio. And step 3, substitute, and then we solve. So let's look at another one. So in this case, we see 46 would be the degree of reference, so that would be theta. So let's label now. So we know here the side opposite the right angle will be the hypotenuse. So we know there will be the hypotenuse. And we see the side opposite the angle that we are given would be the opposite. And here would be the adjacent side. So once again, let's put down the ratios. Some old horses can always hear their owners approach. So you see, once again, we are given the opposite and we want to find the adjacent. So we are given the opposite and the adjacent, a combination of those two. So once again, we see the ratio that we'll use will be tan. So this will be tan again. So tan theta is equal to the opposite over the adjacent. So tan theta would be tan 46 is equal to the opposite, which would be 7 over the adjacent. In this case, would be x. So now we want to solve for x. So unlike the previous example, we don't have the number in the denominator. We have the unknown in the denominator. So we can just do 2 steps to solve for this. So we see the x is dividing. So a wise thing to do is to take the x over with the tan 46. So the x is dividing. So we take the x over, it will multiply. So we'll have x multiplied by tan 46 is equal to 7. And then we have the tan 46 multiplying the x. So when we take that over, it will divide. So we'll have x is equal to 7 divided by tan 46. And x will therefore be equal to, when we punch it in our calculator, we will get 7 divided by tan 46 will give us approximately 6.8. So x is equal to approximately 6.8. So once again, identify the sides, select the ratio that we want to use, and then we work it out. So let's look at another example. So in this example, let's label, of course, the side opposite the angle that we're given. In this case, is we are given 46 degrees. So the side opposite that will, of course, be named the opposite. And the side opposite the right angle would be the longest side, which would be the hypotenuse. And of course, the remaining side would be the adjacent side. So let's put down our ratios. So we see we are given the opposite and we want to find the hypotenuse. So let's see which ratio is suitable. So let's put down the ratios. Some old horses can always hear their owners approach. So we see in this case we are given the opposite and we want to find the hypotenuse. So let's look at which ratio has those two combinations. So we see opposite and hypotenuse. So we see sine ratio has that. So we'll use the sine ratio. So sine theta is equal to the opposite over the hypotenuse. So in this case, so sine theta, theta would be 46, is equal to the opposite, which is 8, over the hypotenuse, which is x in this case. So we solve for x. So we see we have to do an additional step just like what we did just now. So the x is dividing. When we take it over to multiplies, we'll have x multiplied by sine 46 is equal to 8. X will be equal to 8 divided by, so this sine 46 is multiplied. When we take it over, we'll divide. Divided by sine 46. So x will be equal to 8 divided by sine 46. That would simply give us approximately 11.1. X is equal to approximately 11.1, and x is the longest side in this case. So once again, identify the sides, label the sides, and then we see which ratio has the two sides that we are using, and then we substitute and solve. Let's look at our final example. So once again, we want to determine size of x. So we label, so we see the side opposite here would be the opposite, and we see the side opposite the right angle would be the hypotenuse, and we see the remaining side would be the adjacent side. So let's put down our ratios again. So some old horses can always hear their owners approach. So we see we are given the hypotenuse and we want to find the adjacent. So which one of the ratios has those two combinations? Hypotenuse and adjacent. We see cos has that. So we can say cos theta is equal to the adjacent side over the hypotenuse. So we substitute our values. So we'll have cos, in this case theta would be the angle, which is 39, is equal to the adjacent side, which is x, over the hypotenuse, which is 7. So to solve for x, so the 7 is divided, and we take it over, multiplies, we'll have 7 multiplied by cos 39 is equal to x. X will be equal to approximately 5.4, and that would be the value of x. So one thing we should notice that you don't want to take for granted is that all the answers that we found, it's around the range of the numbers that we're given. For example, we were given 7 here, and the answer that we found was 5.4, and in this one we were given 8 as one of the side, and the answer here, which was the longest side, was 11.1, and so on. So there's one thing you want to keep at the back of your mind. The answer that you get should be closely aligned to the other sides. You cannot be given a side as 7 and then when you work it out you get the opposite as 300 and something. That means something is either wrong with your calculator or you made some mistake somewhere or the other. So with that, this has brought me to the end of this video. But of course I must leave some questions for you to work on your own. So we have the first question, you're asked to determine the size of x. So the second one says, A ramp makes an angle of 15 degrees with the ground. If the ramp is 10 meters long, find the height of the ramp above the ground. So you're asked to work out these two questions, and based on how you work these two, then is when you can conclude whether you have a good understanding of how to use the trig ratios to find for missing sides or not. So remember, label the sides, see which one of the ratios has the two things that you want, and then you substitute into that ratio, and then you solve, and ensure you have a calculator when you are working it out. So until then, I'll see you in the next video. Take care.